Number 10. The desert freezer. Your freezer runs non-stop, burning electricity every single hour just to keep last week's leftovers cold, and you still receive an electricity bill for the privilege every month. 24 centuries ago, Persians were storing ice year-round in the middle of scorching deserts, and they did it without a single volt of electricity. They built massive domed structures called Yakhchāls. The name translates to ice pit, and that is exactly what waited beneath each one. These were not small sheds. Their walls reached thicknesses of over 6 feet in some cases, built from a mortar blend of sand, clay, egg whites, and goat hair. That specific combination insulated better than most materials used in modern home construction today. The dome shape was engineered to cast permanent shade over the interior, keeping cool air trapped below while the outside world baked. Warm air naturally rises and escaped through openings at the top of the dome. Cooler air was pulled in continuously through vents positioned lower on the structure. The building breathed like a living system, cycling warm air out and keeping cool air locked inside. But here is the part that sounds impossible. They were not just storing ice. They were making it in a climate where daytime temperatures regularly topped 100 degrees. At night, desert temperatures dropped sharply. Workers channeled water into wide, shallow pools set out under the open sky. The extremely dry air pulled moisture off the water's surface. As it evaporated, it stripped heat away with it. By sunrise, those shallow pools had turned into sheets of solid ice. Workers hauled the ice into the Yakhchāl before the heat returned, and it stayed frozen through months of brutal summer. This was not a luxury reserved for royalty. Entire communities operated these structures as shared cold storage for meat, dairy, and fresh produce. You are spending real money every month just to stop food from going bad. Ancient Persian engineers solved that exact same problem using dirt, calculation, and a grasp of thermodynamics that most people today could not explain. Number 9. The floating farms. The Aztecs fed a city of 200,000 people using farms they built inside a lake. Not beside it, inside it. Lake Texcoco sat in the Valley of Mexico, wide, shallow, and marshy. The Aztecs looked at that flooded landscape and saw farmland. They built artificial islands by layering lake mud, decomposing plant matter, and dredged sediment until each pile rose above the waterline. Then they planted crops directly on top. These were not floating rafts. They were anchored, stable platforms called chinampas, and they turned a swamp into one of the most productive agricultural systems ever built. The genius was in the self-watering design. Crop roots did not stop at the island's base. They grew straight through the floor and down into the lake below, pulling up water whenever the plant needed it. No irrigation channels, no pump systems, no watering schedules. The plants managed themselves. These islands produced up to 7 full harvests per year. Most modern industrial farms are happy if they reach 2. The whole operation ran as a closed loop. Mud dredged from the canals between islands was recycled as fertilizer for the next planting cycle. Fish living in those canals ate plant scraps and dead leaves. Their waste fed the soil. Input became output and cycled back as input again. Nothing was discarded, and nothing needed to be brought in from outside. At its peak, the Chinampa network stretched across roughly 22,000 acres and fed one of the largest cities on Earth at the time, without synthetic fertilizer, without fuel, and without any external supply chain. Mexico City now covers the dried lake bed where this system once ran. The water was drained, the land was paved, and one of history's most efficient food engines was replaced with traffic, concrete, and exhaust. We had a proven system for feeding a dense urban population on a closed loop. We tore it apart and built a city directly over the top of it. Number 8. Towers that breathe. It is 500 BC. You are standing inside a house in the Persian desert where the outside air is sitting at over 110 degrees. Inside, it is cool enough to be comfortable. There is no compressor, no refrigerant, no electricity bill arriving at the end of the month. Just a tower rising from your rooftop, doing all the work quietly above you. The Persians built structures called badgirs. The name translates directly to wind catcher, and it does exactly that. These towers rose high above the roofline with openings designed to catch prevailing winds. Wind entered the opening, funneled down through a vertical shaft, and poured into the rooms below as a steady, cool airflow. Hot air was displaced and pushed out through separate channels. The house breathed continuously. More sophisticated versions used multiple shafts so the system worked no matter which direction the wind came from on any given day. Some designs routed incoming air over underground water channels before it entered the living space. The air picked up moisture, dropped in temperature, and arrived inside the house already cooled. Evaporative cooling built entirely from stone and an understanding of how moving air behaves. Meanwhile, air conditioning in the United States alone consumes roughly 6% of all electricity generated nationwide every year. And the irony is built into the design itself. Modern AC systems dump their excess heat outside as a byproduct of cooling the interior. The more we cool our inside spaces, the hotter we push the air outside, which raises outdoor temperatures and makes people crank the air conditioning harder. We created a feedback loop that makes itself worse over time. Architects have started introducing wind catchers into new buildings and calling it passive cooling, as though it is some brand new concept. One office building in Zimbabwe built using this ancient approach uses 90% less energy for climate control than a conventional structure its size. The Persians figured this out 2,500 years ago. We are only now paying attention again. Number 7. Spirals that pull water. The Nazca Desert in southern Peru is one of the most inhospitable environments on Earth. Rainfall is nearly non-existent. Surface water does not exist there. The ground is baked hard and the air is relentlessly dry. And yet people built communities here, farmed here, and lived here for over 1,000 years. They survived by building something called pukios, spiral-shaped aqueducts that pull water directly from underground in a region where no surface water exists. Picture a wide corkscrew cut into the earth, spiraling downward until it reaches an underground water source. The spiral shape was not decorative. It was the mechanism. Wind moving across the open desert surface was caught by the funnel shape and pushed down into the underground channel network below. That air pressure forced water held in porous rock layers to travel through the tunnels and flow outward without any pump, any motor, or any power source at all. The system is still working right now. More than 500 years after they were built, pukios are still delivering water to communities in one of the driest desert regions on Earth. Scientists did not fully understand how they operated until a study published in 2016 mapped the relationship between wind, spiral geometry, and underground water pressure. 36 pukios are still operating across the Nazca region today, receiving no maintenance, no replacement parts, and no scheduled service of any kind. Right now, a third of the world's population lives under water scarcity. Summits are held, white papers are published, and billions of dollars are pledged towards solving the crisis. Meanwhile, in the Peruvian desert, a stone aqueduct built 15 centuries ago is still quietly delivering water every single day, completely on its own. The technology is not lost or buried in some ancient text. The structures are right there, still standing, still functioning. We simply have not cared enough to understand them well enough to build more. Number 6. Palaces you drink from. When a modern city needs a new water storage facility, it pours a concrete tank somewhere on the outskirts of town and surrounds it with a chain-link fence. Ancient India built 7-story underground structures with hand-carved stone staircases, elaborately sculpted walls covering every surface, and millions of gallons of clean water waiting at the bottom. They called them step wells. India's climate is defined by monsoons. For a few intense months each year, rain falls in heavy sheets across the landscape. Then it stops, and the rest of the year can be brutally dry. Engineers designed step wells to capture that monsoon water and store it underground, where heat could not evaporate it and sunlight could not reach it. Rather than lowering a bucket into a hole, they carved complete staircases descending into the earth. As the water level fell through the dry season, people simply walked further down the steps to reach it. Access stayed consistent no matter how low the reserves sank. The design solved the problem of a shrinking water supply becoming physically harder to reach as the dry season wore on. The largest surviving step well, Rani Ki Vav, sits in the state of Gujarat and descends 7 stories below ground. More than 500 carved sculptures line its interior walls. It was not a utilitarian storage tank. It was a public structure, a gathering space, a piece of architecture that people chose to spend time inside. Stepwells also served as natural cooling spaces. The deeper you descended, the cooler the air became. During the hottest months, people came down not just to collect water, but to escape the punishing heat above ground. India built over 3,000 of these structures across the subcontinent over centuries. Many were abandoned and filled with silt during the colonial era when pipe-fed water systems were introduced. What replaced them was more convenient. What was lost was extraordinary. Number 5. Turning floods into fountains. The Nabateans carved the city of Petra into sandstone cliffs in what is now southern Jordan. At its peak, 20,000 people lived there, surrounded by desert on every side. No river, no lake, just rock, sand, and the occasional violent rainstorm. The images of Petra most people recognize are the facades carved into red cliff faces. But the engineering that kept 20,000 people alive in that landscape was invisible. It was underground, and it was one of the most precisely designed water management systems ever built. Desert rain does not arrive as a gentle drizzle. It comes as a flash flood, a wall of water tearing through narrow canyons, capable of drowning a gorge in minutes and vanishing just as fast. The Nabateans looked at that violent temporary surge and treated it as their entire water supply for the year. They carved channels directly into cliff faces across the surrounding landscape. Miles of precisely angled grooves cut into solid rock that guided every drop of rainfall toward the city. These were not rough scratches in the stone. The angles were calculated to control water speed, prevent erosion, and direct flow without losing a single drop to the surrounding desert. That water rushed into a network of underground cisterns carved beneath the city floor, sealed away from heat and sunlight until it was needed during the long dry months ahead. They also built low stone walls across the desert floor at strategic locations. These barriers slowed flash floodwater just enough for it to soak into the ground, deliberately recharging the underground water table for future use. The system functioned so efficiently that Petra ended up with surplus water. They built decorative fountains in the middle of a desert city, running water in a fountain, surrounded entirely by arid rock and sand, because the engineering gave them more than enough. Number 4. The steel we can't remake. Damascus steel is one of the most famous materials in recorded history. The swords made from it were said to hold an edge sharp enough to slice a silk scarf drifting through the air. That reputation was not myth. The science behind it was real. The source material was a type of steel called woots, developed in India over 2,000 years ago and traded across the ancient world like the highest technology of the era, because it was. Woots contained an unusually high amount of carbon, but the quantity was not the key, the structure was. That carbon was not scattered randomly through the metal. brittle. It was locked into the steel in a specific molecular arrangement. That structure gave the surface a flowing, wavy visual pattern, but more importantly, it made the metal both extremely hard and remarkably flexible at the same time. Most metals cannot do both. Harden a metal enough to hold a sharp edge and it becomes brittle. Make it flexible enough to absorb impact without snapping and it loses its hardness. Woods bypass that trade-off entirely. When modern researchers put fragments of ancient Woods blades under electron microscopes, they found carbon nanotubes embedded in the metal structure. Carbon nanotubes were not officially identified as a material until 1991. Ancient Indian metalworkers were accidentally producing nanotechnology centuries before any instrument existed that could detect it. The knowledge moved from master to apprentice across generations of workshops. Then, around the 1700s, the specific iron ore required to make Woods was exhausted. The supply dried up, and without the right raw material, the process could not be replicated. The knowledge faded because the ingredients disappeared. Right now, we are spending billions developing materials that are simultaneously strong and flexible for spacecraft components, body armor, and medical devices. The answer might already exist inside a 2,000-year-old sword that we still cannot figure out how to reproduce. Number 3. Soil that grows itself. The Amazon rainforest sits on some of the worst agricultural soil on Earth. Constant heavy rainfall washes nutrients out almost as fast as they appear. The topsoil layer is thin, and farming there should be nearly impossible. And yet, scattered across the jungle floor, there are patches of soil so dark and rich they look like someone pressed pure carbon into the ground. They stand out sharply against the pale, depleted earth all around them. Scientists call it terra preta. In Portuguese, that means dark earth. This soil is unlike anything else on the planet. It does not simply hold nutrients. It actively regenerates them. Remove a section of it and leave the space alone, and it slowly rebuilds itself from within over time. It does not deplete. It improves. Ancient Amazonians created this soil deliberately over 2,500 years ago. They combined charcoal, crushed bone, broken pottery, and organic food waste into the ground in specific proportions. The result was not just enriched soil. It was a self-sustaining system that modern science has not been able to fully replicate. Researchers believe the mechanism involves a specific community of microbes that thrives inside the charcoal structure. These microbes cycle continuously through the material, processing organic matter and permanently locking carbon into the soil matrix instead of releasing it into the atmosphere. Modern industrial farming is stripping topsoil from productive land at a rate that cannot continue much longer. The standard fix is chemical fertilizers that create long-term dependency, degrade soil structure over time, and address symptoms rather than causes. Terra Preta does the opposite on every count. It improves with age, retains water like a sponge, and locks carbon underground instead of releasing it as a greenhouse gas. Applied at scale, this technology could meaningfully help with both food security and carbon reduction at the same time. The problem is that we still do not fully understand how to make it. Number 2. The cup that glows. There is a Roman drinking cup sitting in the British Museum. It is 2,600 years old. In ordinary daylight, the glass appears jade green. Shine a light through it from behind and it shifts to a deep, glowing red. The color completely transforms depending on the direction light travels through it. Scientists could not explain this for a long time, so they sliced off a small fragment and examined it under an electron microscope. Inside the glass, they found particles of gold and silver ground down to an average size of around 50 nanometers. A human hair is roughly 100,000 nanometers wide. These metal particles were thousands of times smaller than that. A craftsman working in the 4th century Roman Empire was producing and embedding nanoparticles inside glass, without a microscope, without any scientific instrument we would recognize today. We needed some of the most advanced imaging equipment ever built just to understand what they had done. The particles are so extraordinarily small that they interact with light differently depending on which direction it travels. Light reflecting off the surface scatters as green. Light passing through from behind scatters as red, the same physics that makes the sky appear blue and sunsets appear orange. The Romans had landed on it at the nanoscale without knowing what they were doing. Once researchers understood the mechanism, they recognized practical applications. A thin layer of glass engineered this way could change color in the presence of a specific virus in a blood sample or a toxin in a water supply. No laboratory equipment, no waiting period. A visual signal anyone can read instantly. The Romans accidentally discovered the operating principle behind some of the most advanced medical diagnostic technology being developed right now. They used it to make their wine cups look impressive at dinner. Think about what that means for a moment. We are reverse engineering a party trick from the 4th century and turning it into tools that could detect disease outbreaks before they spread. The knowledge was sitting in a museum display case for over a century before anyone thought to ask how it actually worked. Number 1. Concrete that heals itself. Pour a foundation into the ocean, let waves batter it every day for 2,000 years, and watch it become stronger over time, not weaker. That is not speculation. That is what Roman engineers actually built. They constructed harbor walls, piers, and ocean breakwaters using a concrete mixture that has been sitting in salt water, absorbing the full force of storms and waves for 2 full millennia. And the structures are still standing, still intact, and measurably denser than when they were first poured. Modern concrete in salt water begins cracking and breaking down after roughly 50 years. Coastal nations spend billions every year patching and replacing infrastructure that keeps failing in marine environments. The Romans mixed volcanic ash, lime, and seawater. When that mixture got wet, the seawater did not corrode it. Instead, it triggered a chemical reaction reaction with the volcanic ash that produced new crystalline minerals growing inside the concrete over time. Those minerals filled in cracks as they formed. The ocean was not wearing the structure down, it was feeding a repair process that made the material denser and stronger with every passing decade. Scientists at the University of California analyzed samples of this ancient concrete and found that the mineral crystals forming inside it matched compounds being studied in modern high-performance cement research. The Romans achieved it with volcanic ash and ocean water. Here is what makes this genuinely hard to accept. Producing Roman concrete releases significantly less carbon dioxide than Portland cement, the material used in nearly all modern construction worldwide. Modern cement manufacturing accounts for roughly 8% of global carbon emissions every year, more than the entire commercial aviation industry combined. We had a material that strengthened over centuries, repaired itself naturally, and left a fraction of the atmospheric footprint of what we use today. We lost it and replaced it with a material that degrades in decades, demands constant expensive maintenance, and is actively contributing to a warming planet. Everything on this list was real. All of it worked. Not one of these technologies requires materials we do not have or physics we do not understand. The only thing separating us from every single one of these solutions is whether we are willing to stop assuming that newer always means better.